Jesus' family line traces all the way back to Adam because, of course, it does. Everyone's does. But because it's Jesus, we know the names in between, which is special. We know that of all of Adam's children, it was through Seth that God's promise would be fulfilled. And of all of Seth's children, it was through Enosh. And of all of Enosh's children, it was through Kenan. And of all of Kenan's children, it was through Mahalalel that the Savior would come. We also know, because God told Moses, who wrote it down for us, how old each of those forefathers was when each of those sons was born, and how long each of them lived after, and how old each of them was when he died. They all lived to extraordinary ages, so that it seems that extraordinary ages were ordinary back then. People have guessed why. A canopy of water in the atmosphere that blocked out more UV rays but that dropped to the earth in the flood. Or a diet of plants that had properties that plants have lost over time or that have been negated by millennia of meat eating. Or a special provision of God's patience to allow the earth to become populated by a sustainable number of human beings that he later removed so that overpopulation wouldn't be a problem until, well, now? The short answer is that we don't know why they lived so long. We barely know what adds or subtracts years from our own much shorter lives. So we know Adam lived to be 930, Seth lived to 912, Enosh lived to 905, Kenan lived to 910, and Mahalalel lived to be 895 years old and was the first one not to make it to 900. And we think, what? It's only 5 years. He missed out on 0.5% of the lifespan of his fathers. I'm sure nobody even noticed. And we're right. And that's true. And in a world like ours, of course not everybody gets the same amount of time. 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years, 5 decades, whatever the difference may be, it will be. And there's nothing we can do about it. Block all the UV rays, eat only the best plants, solve the problem of overpopulation. It doesn't matter because we don't know the number. We don't know how long we should live, so we can't know how long we will live by comparison. And we won't notice because we'll be dead. Maybe other people will. Maybe we'll die young enough for people to find it tragic. Maybe we'll live long enough for people to be impressed and celebrate us. Each of us only gets the amount of time that we're going to get, and it's not really helpful or even meaningful to compare with one another. All of which leads to this truth that we all know, but that we all also need to be reminded of because we forget it, because we do compare and we trick ourselves into thinking that it matters. It doesn't. How long you get doesn't actually matter because the truth is, it's quality, not quantity. What good is 900 years of misery? Who cares if you get 0.5% more or less than anyone else? What matters, what ought to matter, is the quality of the years. But how can you gauge the quality without, again, comparing? Does quality of life come from more stuff or less stuff? More experiences or fewer? More laughter, fewer tears? Aren't we falling right back into the trap of comparing lives with one another? It still doesn't make a difference. You still only get the life that you're going to get, good or bad, short or long. We don't get to choose. Mahalalel's life was as long as it was always going to be. Mahalalel's life was as good as it was always going to be. Ours too. But how about this? Mahalalel's life matters to us, we know about it at all, because of his connection to Jesus. Ours too. Our life matters to God because he gives us value in Jesus. And our lives are quality lives in the ways we get to live out our faith in Jesus. And our lives are as long as they are going to be. Our lives are eternal because of Jesus. And the impact of the quality and quantity of our lives on the world and on those around us is measured exclusively in the ways Jesus shows himself to others through us. How about that? Whenever you die, it will be tragic to someone. Whenever you die, your life will already have been impressive to someone. Whenever you die, yours is a life that ought to be celebrated. God's patience and God's grace to you ought to be celebrated because your life is Jesus. You and I are dust and breath, loved by God, bought by Jesus. This podcast is produced by me, Ethan Cherney, a pastor in the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. Get in touch on Facebook at Dust and Breath Pod, on Twitter at Dust Breath Pod, or by emailing dustandbreathpod@gmail.com. Outro music arranged and performed by Mr. Peter Shawy, who is like the dew of Hermon falling on Mount Zion. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you could leave a review in iTunes or just share an episode on social media, I'd really appreciate it. It's the only way other people can find the show. Now, go do what God made you to do. Be who God called you to be. Go see what God can do with dust and breath and faith in Jesus, his Son.